This happened about 5 years ago. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis, working as an ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my door, and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, it was habit for me to not lock my door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in the 5 years since this day. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I'd started earlier in the day before work. My front door opened, and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early, it seemed, and I happily called out to him, "I'm in here, love." I was met with silence and slowly began to feel that sinking feeling of something being wrong crawl up my spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking my husband simply hadn't heard me, and walked out into my living room and kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was male, older than I would estimate 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this moment, and was just standing there, staring at me. No mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wondered if maybe he'd walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave. But as he continued to stare, I realized that I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed up my chest in an attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do as a small female, and used a loud, clear voice, telling him to get out of my apartment and that he had no business being here. He completely ignored me, like I hadn't even spoken. Then he began to pick up my things. My cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and put them into his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe this was all a mistake until that moment. I darted forward toward the only other device I had that would allow me to get help, my computer. I had to take a few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but I still had about 12 to 15 feet between us, so I knew I could grab it and run before he could reach me. As I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to chase after me, and I sprinted back toward the bathroom because it was the only place I could go, and put 2 locked doors between us, my bathroom door and the closet door. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds, I could hear him messing with it and trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked that door too, opening my computer and getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent message after message, pleading with him to call 911 and tell him there was an intruder in our apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone and was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break that door down too. Here's the part where people usually start giving me advice on what I should have done, but all I can tell you is that I froze. With fear or shock, I don't know. But I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in the dark closet. I didn't brace the door or try to hold it closed. I just kneeled in my closet and waited to die, because I just knew that's what was going to happen. People like to tell me that I lived in an apartment. Surely if I'd screamed, someone would have heard and come to help. Surely there was something heavy enough in my closet to use to defend myself. Hell, even the laptop I had would hurt if I swung it at someone. Why didn't I do anything? I don't really have an answer for that. but the closet door miraculously held. I heard frustrated footsteps go back into the living area of my apartment. I heard things breaking, bottles shattering, my drawers and refrigerator and cabinets being flung open as things were torn out of them. I continued to sit in that closet, silently crying, wanting to leave, but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived a 15-hour drive away, and told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort and to tell her how much I love her. I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through, knowing her daughter was in danger, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to help. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would as long as I could, but I also told her to tell my brothers I love them, to help my husband through whatever happened next, if it ended badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get to the apartment before my husband, and that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this invader left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband shouting for me. The intruder walked out toward the living room and kitchen area again, where the front door was located, and I opened the door and darted from the closet to find my husband on the ground with him, pinning him in place. The man kept mumbling and at times yelling, but never really put up much resistance. This entire part is a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filled with fear, mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually, the police found the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that. But from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time officers arrived was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intended to bash them in any way. It just always seemed like this was an unusually long response for a home invasion. They got my things back from the man and took him out of my apartment. I numbly went through the process of filing a police report and telling them what happened. One of the officers commented that I should really keep my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was being insensitive at the time, or blaming me for what happened, but later recognized his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen the situation end differently for other women. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was over, but I've carried the fear, the violation, and the anxiety of having someone intrude into my space for years. If it happened to me once, it could happen again. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. If this or something similar has happened to you, and you're still struggling with the aftermath of it, the sleepless nights, the lying awake listening for sounds of forced entry, the nightmares, the constant checking and rechecking your locks, this is what eventually helped me. A year after this took place, my husband and I moved to the Midwest for his job. We selected a safe town with a nice apartment complex and chose a third-floor apartment with only one point of entry. I looked up every statistic on crime for the neighborhood, finding that an isolated incident of car theft was the only thing reported in decades. I still couldn't sleep at night. It was definitely better than staying in the same apartment in Memphis, but my husband often works night shifts now, and I simply couldn't continue being terrified to sleep at night. I realized my biggest fear wasn't that something could happen again, but that if it did, I was just as unprepared now as I was then. I hadn't changed anything, other than locking my door, and I knew I would likely freeze up again and leave my life up to being able to hide well enough or having a door hold long enough to save me, and that was unacceptable. I walked into a martial arts school with an excellent self-defense program, introduced myself, and started taking classes. At first I was quiet, hiding in the back of the room, and generally keeping to myself. My instructor, who was both incredibly kind and incredibly insightful, slowly built up my confidence and brought me out of my bubble of fear. After several months of training, I finally shared my reason for taking classes with him, and he's worked with me tirelessly to give me the ability to protect myself in any environment. I've been training for years now, and the difference it's made in every aspect of my life is unbelievable. The meek, quiet girl that waited to die in her closet no longer exists. I'm confident. I'm strong. I am worthy of living and protecting myself in my home. I am no longer ashamed of how I handled the situation I was in, but I also understand what steps I can take to ensure that I'm safe. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was worth it. I recognize this might not be a solution or option for everyone. Your experience is valid, and however you decide to cope with your own story is the right choice for you. This is how I happen to do it, and it's worked well for me. Thank you again for listening. I was a little afraid to share this, because I'm not sure how people will respond, but maybe doing so will help someone else that's feeling alone with this. My uncle had an encounter in the summer, several years back. The only reason I believe him is because his whole life, he's always been a super serious, no bullshit kind of guy. When he told me the story, he sounded genuinely upset about it. He's a long-haul truck driver and was stopped on the side of the highway in a heavily wooded area. This was somewhere several miles in the middle of nowhere, but he said it was closest to Reed City, Missouri. I can't recall what he said he was doing, but he had to fix something before he could take off. Also, he didn't have a trailer at the time. He had just gotten done fixing up his stuff and was about to climb into his vehicle when he saw a deer come towards him from the tree line. He said it looked like it might have been running from something. He assumed it might have been a bear. He was just getting ready to leave when, suddenly, he sees something looking at him through the passenger side window. He described it as having jet black fur and bright yellow eyes, as well as vicious-looking, snarling teeth. It was so close to him that he could see its fur blowing with the slight breeze that was coming through. The window was open, but it didn't seem to notice, as was evident when the creature put its paw up to the window as if to press against it, but pulled back in shock when it realized its paw actually entered the vehicle. My uncle typically carries a gun on him. At this time, he had a heavy revolver. The exact name and caliber is beyond my memory right now. He pointed it at the dogman and pulled the trigger, effectively shooting it in the face. He gunned it, and the truck started moving fast enough for him to be confident that the thing wasn't following him should it have survived the shot. He didn't bother waiting around to find out. He said he still gets disturbed when he thinks back to that event. He described it as giving off this aura of pure evil and ill intent in only the few seconds that he faced it. He has nightmares about this creature to this day, and he refused to tell anyone about it for several years after it happened for fear of people thinking he lost his mind. Another reason I'm able to buy his story is because he's never been interested in the occult, supernatural, the paranormal, cryptids, or anything. He had no idea what to make of this thing he saw, but when he told me the story, I told him to look into the Dogman. When we looked online, he said the artist's depictions of the Dogman perfectly fit what he saw that day. I'm currently 28, and I've been a law enforcement officer for 8 years in the southwest part of the US. My story is one of hundreds, but I selected it to be told because I still think it was my personal scariest moment. I was 24 at the time. I had dealt with countless dead people, murders, gruesome fatal wrecks, and saved a man from bleeding to death from knife wounds, pulled an elderly lady from her rolled over burning vehicle, tossed a bastard around after he was attempting to knife his girlfriend in their apartment and ended up keeping her from dying. I had even faced psychopaths directly, staring into their soulless eyes, and heard them tell me ways they would hope to kill me and enjoy it. I talked a man with a gun in hand out of being stupid and pointing it at me or someone nearby, and he gave up and dropped it into a bush. I fought off pit bull dogs from biting at my legs while trying to detain their owner, who was actively throwing scalding hot water on his girlfriend. Such is life as a cop. But this day remains in the bowels of my soul. It was a Monday night, my Friday of a 4-day work week. Slow, as most Mondays during school times are. I'm parked with my driver's door next to my partner's driver's door. It's cold, and we're chatting it up about upcoming video games as our breath leaves trails of humidity between our cars. And then we hear it. The call that changed the way I think of houses forever. The dispatch calls for me and my partner, who belong to the sector where the address is. It comes in as a domestic violence, where the male forced the front of a gun into his wife's mouth and has now turned the gun on himself, making threats of suicide by cop. To clarify, no police officer ever thinks happily on the fact that someday they may have to kill someone. This is not our happiest moment, ever. We make cruel and unusual jokes, and sometimes in this nature, but that's a socio-defense mechanism to prepare us for those days. We get to the block and turn off our headlights long before we see the house. It's huge. A mansion of castle-like proportions. It seemed bigger in the darkness in which we arrived. We approach on foot silently and hear a woman screaming. We run to the front door, and out she comes, naked and bloody. She had a gunshot wound to her shoulder that she held a t-shirt to. Her words were, "He's got the gun to my daughter's head." My partner asked for more officers on scene and medical to stand by blocks away. Our sergeant was coming too, but we couldn't wait. Not after hearing that. The insides of this castle were the darkest I have ever known. My whole body was cold, but my mind was hot, and I could just sense pure evil. To anyone who doesn't know what this is like, I can never explain it in enough detail. Pure evil, you can feel inside your soul. It's like walking in a fog all of a sudden, where life and happiness are far away on the outside world and not known, where the only colors are black, gray, and red. We approached the door with our firearms at the ready. I had my M4 rifle, as this was involving a gun. The upper hand really helps in these situations, but this time, it was irrelevant to the horrors inside this home. We ran inside and were confronted by a huge entrance area, of which we quickly took to both sides, waiting to identify this man's location. Then we heard them. Boom, boom, boom. Gunshots from somewhere inside the dark house. Upstairs, up the winding stairs with open banisters. We ran up those stairs as fast as we could. Then we heard the girl screaming, as if her insides were being forced outward by bare hands. We started to run to that door as fast as we could, and right before the door, we heard more gunshots. We saw flashes from inside the room. My worst nightmare was happening. I quickly realized I could still hear the little girl. We ran inside to a bloody disaster. He was dead, and the little girl was tied up, hogtie style. Blood was splattered all around the room. There were black candles and sacrificial things in the room. Thank God, the girl was unhurt. The guy had shot himself multiple times, 3 in the stomach, 3 in his chest, and I'd assumed 3 in the face, but the second was instantly fatal. I have no idea what was happening. I have no idea why the house was so dark, but the poor little naked girl was okay, and that's all I gave a damn about. She was later placed into state custody as a 2-year-old. Her mother, having satanic ritual tattoos, later admitted that they planned on killing the girl, who had no documentation for her birth. I, a 52-year-old female at the time, was traveling by car to an out-of-town job assignment. I had stopped at a popular and busy gas station / travel stop. Okay, it was Buc-ee's. To fill up the car, stretch my legs, use the restroom, and grab a snack. I was approached by a developmentally disabled woman who appeared to be in her mid-20s. She was looking for a ride to a town a couple of towns over. Her ride had apparently abandoned her while she was in the restroom. She was a little upset. She didn't have a cell phone and didn't know any phone number she could call for a ride. I checked with the employees at the store, and they said that she had been there for an hour looking for a ride because her friends had left while she was in the restroom. I then made the decision to do something I've never done before: offer a stranger a ride. I wasn't going to the town she wanted to go to, but I was heading in that direction, and I told her I could drop her off at the grocery store in the next town, where I'd be turning off to go to my destination. The grocery store was always busy, and it was very likely she'd have an easier time getting a ride to where she wanted to go. Also, she'd be like 5 miles away from where she wanted to go instead of 25, and she'd have an easier time walking that distance if she had to. This was agreeable to her, and we set off. Right away, I noticed a van following us. I tried to lose it, but it kept pace. Meanwhile, the woman wanted to play with my phone. I told her no, it wasn't a personal phone. It was for work, and I moved it out of her reach. I noticed the van speed up and start to get closer. The woman suddenly remembers her boyfriend's phone number and says we need to call him. I can't use my phone while driving. This was pre-car sync voice activated operation, and I was approaching the outskirts of the business district of the next town, and there was no cell phone use while driving signs everywhere. I told her, we're almost to the grocery store. We can call him from the parking lot. She became agitated and yells, "No, you have to take me home." I told you I can't do that. I'm not going to. It's in the opposite direction of where I need to go, and I'm expected soon. We'll call him from the parking lot. She became more upset and frustrated. The van was getting closer. I pull into the grocery store parking lot. It's about 4 p.m. The grocery store is busy. I pull up in front of the store and ask for her boyfriend's number. Suddenly, she can't remember it. She won't get out of my car. She's arguing with me, and the van is pulling into the parking lot. I see a sheriff's deputy parked nearby, and I roll my window down and signal that I need to speak to him. He walks over and asks me what's going on. I told him I met this woman and now she won't get out of my car. And under my breath, I tell him the van has been following us. The deputy tells the woman, "She brought you where you asked her to. It's time for you to leave her car now." She slowly gets out of the car, and I ask once more for her boyfriend's number, and she says, "You're crazy. I don't have a boyfriend." Then, she says, "Oh look, there are my friends now." And of course, she points to the fucking van. The deputy and I share a look, and he says, "Give me your contact info. I can delay them for about 20 minutes while I check their license and registration and lecture them about abandoning a special needs adult. You get out of here, and I'll check on you before my shift is over. And don't pick up any more hitchhikers." I left and went on to my destination. He called me to make sure I got to where I was going and told me that they were keeping an eye on the van and its owner. He told me he had also contacted a colleague at the sheriff's department in the county where I was working, and that she would contact me in a day or two. While I was on assignment there, I spoke to 2 deputies and a detective about the women in the van. No one ever told me anything about them, but they definitely seemed very interested in them. My nightmare is one day I'll turn on a true crime show and see a report about this woman and her gang robbing and killing people. So, woman looking for a ride at the travel stop, let's not meet again. This happened maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when I was still in the Air Force and stationed in Georgia. I worked nights and would get off shift in the early morning when the sun was just starting to creep up for the day. I didn't live too far from base, so I liked to take a bit of a back road through the woods instead of dealing with the traffic lights and stuff. One morning, I think it was winter because there was nothing on the trees and I could see pretty far into the woods. I saw this huge dog off to my right, past the first few rows of trees, and I slowed down to get a good look at it. The damn thing stood up on its hind legs and stared right back at me for a few moments before turning and walking off deeper into the woods. It was monstrous, easily taller than me by a couple of feet, and pretty thickly built. The face had been absolutely canine, and it had pointed ears, which is why I don't really believe it was a bear. It walked like it was meant to be on 2 legs, not the awkward amble that I've seen bears do. Naturally, I gunned it and ran the next stop sign. I didn't really feel like stopping until I gotten back to civilization. I was literally shaking when I got home. I don't know how to explain it, but when it looked at me, I felt like there was an intelligence to it, and it chilled me. Kind of the same sort of awful dread you get when you have sleep paralysis. I had no interest in ever seeing something like that again, and I really don't talk about it because I know how crazy it sounds. I've since moved away, but for the rest of the time I lived there, I never took that road again. I ended up diving into a lot of dogman content online after this, trying to put some logic to what I had seen. And even though I live in the desert now, I still get a little bit dicey about being out in the sticks alone. I keep reading stories about sightings as a bit of a passive interest nowadays. I live in a small city in Texas currently, but I grew up in a small town about an hour and 30 minutes away. When I visit my family and go home afterwards, I have 2 different routes I can take. One is the highway, and the other, which is slightly faster, is through the back roads. The back roads mainly consist of empty farm roads with nothing but windmills and farmland. Occasionally, there are 1 or 2 cars, but most of the time it's empty. On this particular occasion, I decided to take the back roads. My roommate, who had also come to visit her family, was driving behind me in her truck. It was around 6 p.m., and the sun was about to set, but not fully set, leaving the sky with an orange hue. As we were driving along this back road, I see something up ahead, crouched down next to a bush. As I get closer, I see that it's white, and its skin looks leathery. Its legs are extremely long. As I pass it, it jumps over my car onto a tree on the other side of the road. During this moment, I don't react for some reason. I keep on driving, looking ahead with a blank face. It feels as if I'm in a trance. When the thing jumped over my car, I was able to see how long its legs actually were. It jumped off the ground like a spring that was pushed down and then let go. It had equally long arms, and overall, it basically looked like a tall, large proportioned human. For some reason, I could have also sworn it had a hat on. The best way I could describe it is like the white spy from Spy vs. Spy. Picture that, but with long arms and legs, as well as a thin torso. Like I said, I felt like I was in a trance. I drove and drove with my friend behind me until we got to our apartment. The whole way, my mind was blank, and for the life of me, I can't explain how my mind and body felt. We got home, and I had completely forgotten about it, and neither my roommate or I brought it up. Until about 2 weeks later, my roommate and I were drinking, and for some reason, she said something that instantly reminded me of that day. I looked at her and asked, "Hey, do you remember that time where we were driving through that back road, and that thing jumped over my car?" She instantly remembered, and told me she felt like after it happened, and that she was in some kind of trance. She described the thing exactly the way I pictured it. However, from her point of view, she definitely saw it a lot clearer. I still can't explain what exactly it was we saw, and why we were in a trance after we saw it, or why we completely forgot about it until that night. If anyone has any theories, or maybe a logical explanation, I would love to hear it. I sometimes stay awake at night, thinking whatever it was might show up again and take me. I still drive down the same road, hoping I might come across it again. I'm not so much afraid, just confused.